So I'm very happy to be your chairperson and my vice chair and my ranking. And I think we'll start introducing ourselves around the table and then our staff as well. So would you like to start, Senator Petty?
Certainly, Chairman. I'm Senator Pat Petty. I represent the 6th District, which is a large portion of Wyandotte County and a small portion of Johnson County. And I'm starting my 4th term, 13th year in the Senate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bill Clifford, Senate District 39, the far southwest corner of Kansas, formerly in the House for 3 terms. I've been married 42 years and have 6 children. My wife has 7.
Had to stop and think about it.
I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. I'm Ron Reitman for the 38th District, which really is the southwest corner. And glad to be here, and let's have fun.
So your chairperson, Elaine Bowers, Senate District 36. I live in Concordia, and I am starting my 19th year in the legislature, and I can tell you this window right here, this was called the bullpen, and I had that corner office we had dividers in between us. So that was my first office. So we all kind of comes around. So I'm happy to be your chairman again, and I'm really thrilled that these 2 committees are combined. We were the same committee the last 4 years of members, but 2 separate topics. So it's nice that we brought it all back together. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Olitha Falscudo. I represent the 29th District. That's in the city of Wichita. And I served in the House, too, at one time. So, but good morning. And yes, look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Kenny Titus, District 18, which encompasses all of Pottawatomie County, the north half of Shawnee County, and most of Jefferson County. My wife Karen and I live in Wamego, and we have 2 sons.
Good morning. I'm Craig Bowser, Senate District 1. My Senate District includes all of Atchison, Doniphan, Jackson, Brown, and Nemaha counties, includes parts of Marshall County, northern Jefferson County, and sort of northwestern Leavenworth County. Delighted to be here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Joe Clays. I have Senate District 27. That includes northwest Wichita and Mays. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Let's have staff. Would you like to start, Jill?
Good morning. Jill Shelley with Legislative Research.
I'm Julianne Block with Legislative Research as well.
We can have our computer tech. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Jaden Barry.
And Jaden, will you be with us every meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful.
Jason Long with the Revisor's Office.
And Charles Reimer with the Revisor's Office.
We're lucky we have this staff. Jill's been with us a long time, and Jason and Charles as well. So we're thrilled to have you back, and Jillian, thank you too. So, well, in your, just going off our agenda, in your folders are the rules that we just carried over from last year. If you want any additions or changes, come see me. Then the committee rules and conferee rules are posted on the committee website under committee documents, if you'd like to look at those. So now, do we have any bill introductions? Yes, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to request introduction of 25 RS 0033 regarding the bonding limitations on townships.
All right. Without objection, we'll accept that. Thank you, Senator Titus. Randy, did you capture that number? Okay. All right. I don't see any, oh, Senator Fascido.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So do you have a listing of all of the committee members' names and contact info?
I'm sure we can pull that together. Can we put a spreadsheet together, Randy? Probably very quickly. We have it. We can just distribute it to you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, we only have one presentation today, and that would be Jay Hall. He's Deputy Director of General Counsel. We will be having a few presentations until we have some bills assigned to us. And next week, we will have the League of Municipalities speaking to us as well. So wonderful, Jay. You are ready to go, I believe? Jay's not starting, but Jay will be up. So, yes. So you introduce yourself for the record, and we'll get you in the minutes.
Thank you so
Yes.
much, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Bruce Cladney with the Kansas Association of Counties, and it's my pleasure to be with you here today. And as you were all going around and introducing yourself, this is my 5th year with the organization, and I think this is probably my 3rd or 4th time that I've stood in front of you and shared with you the importance of local county government. And I was happy to hear every county that you listed off that you represent are the same counties that we represent. So every one of your counties are members of our organization, and so we're happy to be partnering in the same causes as we work our way through this endeavor. So we do have a presentation. Is it around somewhere? So Jay and I are going to be tag teaming it, and so you'll get to listen to me first for a few minutes, and then I'll turn it over to Jay. So. Make sure that this works. It is not working. Let me try this one. It is not working.
Are you able, Jaden, to advance his slides for him manually? Would that work, Bruce?
That'll work.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Yep. If you'll just go ahead and advance the slides, that would be great. So we've got this presentation split up into 3 different parts. We're going to talk a little bit about a look at who KAC is, and then the responsibilities of local government, and then also some of our priorities that we're hoping to work on this legislative cycle. So those next slide, please. So a real quick look at who we are. We are an instrumentality of our county members, and we were allowed for by state statute, as you can see, 19-2690. And we were formed back in January 1 of 1976. So not quite as old as the League of Municipalities, but we still have a history behind us of working with local government. Our offices are just down the street. In fact, on a nice day, we were able to walk up here, and we're a staff of 6. So there's myself, we've got Jay Hall, Deputy Director, and then we have an Education and Communications Director, and you'll see a lot of the materials that we send out as an organization to the public and to our members come from Kimberly Qualls. We have a newly hired Membership Engagement Director, and that is Amy Addington, and she's really jumping into engaging our members to be a part of the organization and to be a part of this legislative process. And then we also have Dornil Leal, who is our financial guru, and then we also have a partner with the Kansas Department of Transportation. Daryl Lutz just started with us, and it's been a several-year process that we've had the partnership. It started off with Norm Bowers, then we had Keith Browning, and now we have Daryl Lutz, and they really are the connection between KDOT and local government, and so they do a lot of programming and outreach, and it's a great partnership that we've enjoyed for quite a few years. So, next slide, please. As you can see, we've got quite a list of responsibilities that we're responsible for as an organization. We're supposed to be representing local government during the advocacy process, so that's why Jay and I are here with you today. We're also to strengthen the role of counties in our intergovernmental system, so we're really trying to create a better bond between all levels of government, the League of Municipalities, us, and then at the state as well. And then we also promote responsible, efficient, and effective local government, so we're all about creating efficiencies and transparency, so a lot of the initiatives that we work on, that we advocate for, fall in that arena. And then we provide research and technical assistance to member counties and affiliate and associate organizations. So Jay gets calls all the time about how to do this, how to do that, advice on issues and things like that. So we are an educational resource, a technical resource for our member counties. And then we also provide education, continuing education through various trainings and classes and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits that member counties have in our organization. And so what you see with us here the next couple of months with you all is just a very small piece of the overall mission of our organization. And with that, I have to invite you, make sure you join us for Local Government Day. That's coming up in just a couple of days on January the 22nd. We'll be hosting you all for an evening reception, so we enjoy if you'll come over and share a glass of celebration with us and something to eat and some conversation. So we'll be at the Beacon the evening of January the 22nd, and then we'll also be back here in the Capitol for County Day at the Capitol, and that will be on February the 6th. So we'll try to fill the second floor rotunda with all things county, between the organizations, the services that we provide, and education and things like that. So we invite you to come down and stop by and learn a little bit more about what county's doing. And then we'll also be celebrating County Government Month in the month of April. So we look forward to getting some word out there and helping celebrate all things county. So lots of stuff going on in the next couple of weeks with you all involved. So we look forward to seeing you there. Next slide, please. So as I said, as you guys were listing off the counties that you represent, we have 101 counties that are our members. Unfortunately, we don't have the 4. We don't have Harper, Chautauqua, Cherokee, and Pawnee. An interesting thought, though, an interesting caveat is that starting tomorrow, we're going to be welcoming in the new commissioners that were elected this past election cycle. And we've got over 80 of them coming here to Topeka for a 3-day workshop, a 3-day training, new commission orientation that we sponsor. And luckily, Chautauqua County is sending one of their new county commissioners. Even though they're not a member, they see the benefit of having their commissioner educated by our programs, and so they're sending their new commissioner. We're excited to welcome him. So I say that because, in all honesty, we are not a regulatory organization. Nobody has to belong to us, and so sometimes we will get frustrated calls about what's going on in the county, and they want us to do something about it. And unfortunately, as much as we'd like to be able to do something about it, we really can't. We are in advocacy and we're in education, but we are not regulatory. So all we can do is share with the offending county, if you will, what's going on and why it may or may not be appropriate to do what they're doing. And that's about the extent of what we can do. So just wanted to get that out there. So we don't get calls at all hours of the night with complaints about this county's doing this or this county's doing that. It's nice to know what they're doing, but we can't change it. Real quickly, we are governed by a 19-member board, and our member board comes from these organizations. So each one of those county functions that you have operating in the county that you live in, they have professionals that belong to these various organizations. So I bring that up to you because I think you're going to be hearing from the group from the Farm Bureau talking about the election school that they run. And so this is why it's so important to make sure that citizens of Kansas know that they are being served by folks that are educated and highly schooled. And so getting the word out that we want quality people to run for these public offices is paramount to making sure that the system continues to run efficiently. So, and then we have 4 more, and on the next slide, please. Then we have 4 more associations that are not necessarily, they're the associate members, and so they don't have a seat on our governing board, but they are part of our legislative process. So they help us craft the legislative policy that we create and then work off of during this legislative cycle. So as you can see, we're trying to be all-encompassing, that we try to represent all of county government, not just one facet or one segment. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay. And I'll be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Bruce. And if we go to the next slide, I am Jay Hall, the Deputy Director and General Counsel for the Kansas Association of Counties. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what counties do and then cover our legislative priorities. So counties have 3 basic functions, the first of which is we are the administrative arm of the state. We do a lot of state functions, and I'll talk about those a little bit more as we get into this. And then we also provide legally required services. So these are things that are statutorily required that counties do, and we provide those services at the local level. And then we also provide locally determined services. And those locally determined services are really services that our citizens in each county request or ask their counties to provide. And so in addition to providing those legally required services, we also provide services that the citizens of our individual counties desire to have, like parks and recreation and some of those types of things. Next slide, please. So Yeah, that's the next slide. So again, when we talk about mandatory services, I want to make sure that we understand that those services are the services that are required by state law. So counties have to perform those services. Those are not optional services. Those are not services that our citizens can opt into or opt out of having their county government provide. Those are services that must, by Kansas statute, be provided at the local level. And so when we talk about required services and mandatory services, that's really what we mean is those things that are required. And you should have a handout either in your packet or that is online that talks about the types of spending that we'll have in those mandatory services. That's spending that is required, and we can't really get out of that spending. And as you see, it takes up a good portion of the county budget to provide those services that we are required to provide by state statute. Next slide. And so these are some of the services that you see, and these next couple of slides list those services out. I won't read them to you right now, but these are some of the services with the statutory citation of where those are required. Next slide. And then we have another half dozen or so that are required here. There are 18 in total that we've kind of highlighted. Next slide. That you see that we are required to provide those services. And these are the services that are also highlighted on the handout that you have. That we kind of show you the cost of what it takes to provide those services. Next slide. So now I want to talk about some of these administrative duties so that you have an idea of what the counties are actually doing when we talk about administrative duties like tax collection. Counties are required to collect taxes for all of the other local entities. So the city doesn't collect taxes, the township doesn't collect taxes. Those are actually distributed by the county. The county is the one that actually collects those taxes and does the administrative work for that. So we have about 4,000 or over 4,000 taxing units, whether that's school districts or cities, townships, hospital districts, cemetery districts, airport districts. All of those things are taxing units. We have over 4,000 of those. They don't all send you a bill. That bill actually comes from your county that you live in or that you own property in. And the county actually handles the collection of those taxes and then the distribution of those taxes to the other taxing jurisdictions, whether that be your city or your township, your cemetery district, whatever that might be. Next slide. As you see, counties only keep a small portion of the overall tax bill. And this is something that we try to educate the public on just because you get that, like, for example, I get a bill that is from the Shawnee County Treasurer that is my tax bill. But most of that money doesn't actually go to Shawnee County. That money, I write the check to Shawnee County, but then that money is distributed to the city of Topeka and the 501 school district and Washburn University in my case, and a lot of the other entities that are here locally to me. And so the same thing happens throughout the state where the county will distribute that money, but they only keep a small portion of those taxes that are collected. Next slide. Counties also do property valuation, and property valuation is something obviously that has been controversial as we talk about how to value properties, how to determine how to tax properties. The valuation is one part of the overall tax process. The appraisers are actually appointed by county commissioners, but they are overseen at the state level by the Property Valuation Division in the Department of Revenue, and they have certain metrics that they are graded by within the Department of Revenue. Next slide. Counties also administer elections. So at the state level, obviously, we have the Secretary of State that sets parameters and oversees the election from the state level, but we actually run 105 local elections within running the overall state election. And so the county is responsible for all of those things when it comes to securing polling places, finding poll workers, all of those types of things that it takes to run a fair and safe and secure election. Those are the responsibility at the local level of your counties. Next slide. Counties also issue licenses, and this varies from county to county. Some counties do more licenses than others, but this is something that you can obtain at the county level as well. Next slide. Counties also maintain land records. We have land records in counties that go back. I mean, some of them, if you really are interested, you can actually go to the county courthouse and look at the paper copies of land records all the way back into the late 1800s, if you so desire. Most of our counties are getting more towards the digital records because those paper records just don't hold up as well as they used to. But we are responsible for maintaining those land records at the county level. Next slide. Also provide the equipment and facilities for the judiciary, and this is important, obviously, with the administration of not only civil law, but also criminal law. That is the responsibility of counties to provide the facilities, the staffing, all of those kinds of things. That comes out of the county budget as well. Next slide. As I said, with prosecution, counties pay for either their district attorney or their county attorney. They are responsible for paying for those positions. So when you think about whoever the prosecutor is locally for your county, your county government is responsible for paying for that. Next slide. As I mentioned before, we have all these state mandated services. The public health services, obviously this is something that came really to the forefront a few years ago, that people didn't necessarily realize that counties were responsible for all of these things until it became a topic of more interest. But counties are responsible for all of those things that are listed there. They're also responsible for just making sure that those things are administered at the local level. Next slide. Mental health services as well, counties are responsible for that. Usually they partner with the centers for mental health throughout the state to provide those services. Those services are generally provided regionally, but counties partner with various centers for those services. Next slide. Emergency management, and this is something that we talk about more as the spring and summer get here, when we deal with things like floods and tornadoes and that sort of thing. But emergency management is a county function. If you've been watching the news and seeing about the wildfires out in California, those are the types of things that counties are responsible for here in Kansas. I know we've had our share of brush fires and floods and tornadoes. That's a county function to handle the emergency management and work closely with the Kansas Department of Emergency Management to make sure those services are provided locally. Next slide. Counties are also responsible for solid waste planning, and I mention this because not every county has a landfill. One of the things that is becoming more of an issue is that landfills are very, very difficult to site because nobody wants to live next to a landfill. So because of that, counties have to balance a lot of interests when they are doing their solid waste planning, because on one hand, we all create trash, we all throw things away, but on the other hand, it's very hard to figure out where to put those things. And so counties are responsible for making those difficult decisions as well. Next slide. Not every county has a jail, but counties are responsible for law enforcement and for holding those accused of crimes. And so whether your county has a jail or not, they're responsible for housing those individuals, whether that means housing them in their own county jail or housing them in the county jail of another county. I will mention that it doesn't necessarily provide savings to house them somewhere else because you're paying the other county for that. And depending on how far away that county is from your courthouse, you may be paying a couple of sheriff's deputies a lot of money to essentially be chauffeurs to drive people back and forth to various jails. So that's something that counties have to consider when they look at the expense of running and facilitating a jail. Next slide. Counties are also responsible for noxious weed eradication. There is a list of noxious weeds in the state statutes. Counties are responsible for operating that department, funding that department, providing the chemicals for eradicating those noxious weeds. Next slide. As Bruce mentioned, we do have a local road engineer program that works closely with KDOT. Daryl Lutz is our local road engineer this year, and he works with not only KDOT, but with our local county road and bridge departments to provide those services. Counties actually provide the maintenance for 80% of the roads here in Kansas and about 75% of the bridges here in Kansas. So we don't necessarily provide, we provide a lot of road miles, and a lot of that is actually some of the lesser maintained roads as far as gravel roads, not necessarily all of them are paved. But the important thing to remember about that is the last mile oftentimes to get commerce from the farm to the table. In order to go from farm to table, oftentimes you are riding on a county road. And so the county road and bridge department is very important in maintaining the interests of Kansas as far as commerce is concerned. Next slide. And this is just a breakdown of the amount of road that we have. As I said, most of the road that counties maintain is actually unpaved. And so you see 87%, although we have less traffic on those roads. Again, these are often the roads that get from the farms and the oil wells back to city centers. So those are important roads, even though they don't have as much traffic. Next slide. And then I mentioned locally determined services earlier. These are the things that local citizens are interested in having, whether it's the medical services like hospitals and home health care, those types of things. Economic development is something a lot of counties put money into so that they can continue to grow their counties. Planning and zoning, a little more than half of the counties here in Kansas are zoned, and so planning and zoning is an important thing, as well as airports and economic development, cultural and leisure types of things. So all of those things are locally determined. They are not required to be provided by state statute, but oftentimes these are the things, those quality of life types of things that a lot of people are interested in having provided locally. Next slide. And so now I want to wrap up by talking about some of our priorities that we have for this legislative session so that your committee is aware of these things as we start talking about them later on in the legislative session. Next slide. The first thing I want to cover, though, is our guiding principle of home rule and local control. The decisions that are made are often best made at the local level because those are the people that are on the ground dealing with those folks day in and day out. If you're a county commissioner, chances are you see your constituents everywhere you go. You will run into them at church, at the grocery store, at the Little League game, at the high school game, at the PTA meeting. You cannot get away from your constituents because they live down the street from you all the time. So that's one of the reasons that local control is really important to us, because our local county officials face their constituents every day. They hear about it when the snow isn't plowed. They hear about it when the roads are not maintained. They hear about it when there are complaints in the community because they are in the community every single day. Those are the problems that they have to deal with. Those are the problems that they confront as they go about their lives in their communities. Next slide. So one of the things that I want to talk about, and this is something that has been in the news lately, is availability of notices. I know that there was a situation out in western Kansas where a school district had a bond issue that was rejected because it was not posted on the county website because the county actually didn't have a website. And so we want to make sure that notices are becoming available to all of the citizens in the interests of government transparency. And we've actually been talking to the Information Network Kansas about the possibility of putting together a website that cities, counties, and school districts could utilize for publishing those types of notices. And most people that are out there are using the internet to get a lot of their news now, whether that's Facebook or whether that's general sites, whatever it might be. A lot of people are using the internet to get their information now. State law requires that newspapers are used for official alerts, and we have no desire at this point to eliminate that, but we want to make sure that we are also able to utilize other means to make official notices. And then we want to make sure that people are being informed, because obviously, most of the notices that are going out, you have to subscribe to the paper, you have to go get the paper if you don't subscribe. You may not see all of those notices, and we want to make sure that those notices are being distributed as wide as possible so that people are informed of that. Unfortunately, right now, state law requires that counties publish in the official newspaper. That is the only official notice. And so what we are seeking is legislation that would allow us to post either in an official newspaper or on the internet or both, to allow for that flexibility to make sure that people are being informed and that government is transparent at the local level. Next slide. We also have the desire to have a decreased reliance on property taxes for local government funding, particularly for these legally required services. And I have two examples up there. The first I'll talk about is vehicle registration. As some of you that have been in the legislature know, we've had a bill the last few years dealing with motor vehicle registration. Every county in the state of Kansas is currently supplementing their vehicle registration program with property tax dollars. What that means is that the fees that are being collected are not enough to operate their motor vehicle registration program. As a result, they have to supplement that money that they collect in fees with money from local property taxes. What does that mean? That means that property taxes have to be increased to continue to supplement that required service. And that's something that we would like to see, a decreased reliance on that for those mandated services, because we have to provide that service locally, but it creates an ongoing burden when you have more and more of those services that have to be supplemented with property tax dollars. Another example is land records. We've eliminated the mortgage registration fee a number of years ago. I think it's about 10 years ago now. And as a result, counties have had to dip into property taxes to supplement those fees as well. And so because of that, those programs don't pay for themselves, but they are things that we are required to provide at the county level. And it's important to know that that pulls on property tax dollars as much as anything else. Next slide. We also have rising budget costs, and this is something that we are very sensitive to, because counties exist in the same market that everybody else exists in. So when the price of food goes up, that means the price of food for jails also goes up. When the price of gas goes up, that means the price of gas for our sheriff's deputies and our road and bridge crews, that also goes up. It also shows up in places that you might not necessarily think of. I was talking to some of our road and bridge folks about how much gravel has increased in price over the last 7 or 8 years. That's something that you or I as a citizen, unless you buy a lot of rock, probably don't notice. But for county road and bridge, when we're dealing with 87% of our roads are gravel roads, an increase in the price of gravel is something that is going to hit counties much more distinctly than it would hit your average citizen in a way that the average citizen doesn't notice, because I might buy 100 pounds of rock in a given year, but for the county, they're buying tons and tons and tons of rock for those 87% of those unpaved roads. So we need to keep that in mind, that counties are paying those costs, and that is also a driver of our budgets when we talk about county costs. Next slide. We also have aging infrastructure, and this is not just roads and bridges. This is also when we talk about facilities like jails and county courthouses and things like that. And this becomes particularly important because as that infrastructure continues to age, it gets more expensive to maintain if we don't maintain it. Deferred maintenance is something that you can only get away with but for so long before it becomes cost prohibitive. And again, when you look at the county level at services that we are required to provide, facilities that we are required to have, we can't just tell our judges and our prosecutors that they have to hold court outside in a tent because we have to have facilities for them to operate. And so as that infrastructure continues to age, as those buildings continue to age, they become more expensive to safely maintain, and that's something that we have to keep an eye on at the county level because those costs contribute obviously to the county budget. So I think those are the highlights. I think the next slide is just questions, if I remember right. So if you have any questions, there's our contact information, but if there are any questions, either myself or Bruce can answer those questions. So.
We've had several hands, Jay,
Okay.
so I think I've got the order. So Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming today. And I took great interest in the issue with the school bond. I work for schools, and that's of course a great concern, especially when it comes down to something as simple as a website. But it brings up a lot of other questions too, because if you can't put together a simple website, it makes me wonder how well a county is at dealing with elections and things of that nature. I'm not speaking to that particular county. I'm not going to get in the weeds about that issue, other than it's an interesting example and a little jarring. My question for you is, do we have too many counties? And if you don't want to answer that, at what point would you, or what population size would you begin to be concerned that a county can't meet its statutory obligations?
I think the question would be, how large do we want a given county to be? Because obviously some of our least populous counties are also in the western portion of the state. And the way that Kansas was originally laid out, it was designed so that the county seat was never more than a day's ride away from anybody that lived in the county. And so that's why you will notice, especially as you go further and further west in our state, that most of the counties are roughly square. And a lot of those counties, the county seat is almost exactly in the middle of the county, because there was a desire to make sure that if you were a farmer, a rancher, or just lived out on the prairie, you could get on your horse, ride to the county seat, and ride back in a day. I think that was brilliant for the founders of our state to outline counties that way, because we wanted to make sure that even though Kansas is a geographically large state, that you are always close to your government. And so the question would be, how far away do we want to make people be from their local government? Because if we start eliminating some counties, you are making some people get a lot further away from their local government. And at that point, how local is that government would be the question that we would have to consider there. I think the other question is, when you talk about providing certain services like operating a website, the question is, how much expertise do you want to pour into operating a website versus some of those other statutorily required services? Do you want an employee dedicated to operating and updating the website, making sure that the website is always online and all of those kinds of things, when that employee is probably already wearing several hats, as maybe the fire chief and the emergency manager, or maybe they are the county clerk and also performing other duties, or maybe they assist the county clerk but also work some hours in the treasurer's office, or also work a shift at the jail from time to time, or take dispatch calls. All of those things are required, and so it becomes a balancing act of trying to be efficient and not necessarily provide services that may not be required, which is why we have talked to Inc. about possibly having a site that counties don't have to maintain themselves, but that would still meet the statutory requirements, so that we can address the concerns that I think you have without putting additional burden on a county staff that is already probably stretched fairly thin.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And thank you for your presentation. Either you can answer this or Executive Director. We think of local government, we think so much of the money comes from property tax and real estate or personal. And we're hearing some different proposals, and this is not a tax. Obviously, this is not a tax committee. But we do hear as senators, people are upset about how high their property tax. Obviously, you listed so many areas that we do, and the demand's going higher and the costs and so on. So as we address this issue, and we might not be able to answer this right now, but as we address this issue, do you have any suggestions or how we could perceive on this? Thank you.
So I think the first question is, how can we fund local government without putting more of a burden on property tax? And really that comes down to, are we putting that burden on individuals because our property tax base is not wide enough? In other words, we have too many exemptions and exceptions to that tax, and so the people that are left are paying more because there are exemptions and exceptions to that property tax. In addition, have we taken away other streams of revenue that put a higher burden on property taxes than on other items? So those are the questions that we have to ask, because unfortunately the costs are something that we have some control over at the county level, but not complete control, because we are market participants just as everyone else is.
Senator Fascido.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jay Hall, thank you for the fabulous presentation and breaking it down into real-life examples. So 2 quick questions, Madam Chair. So when you talk about required services, so in my district, in City of Wichita, it's a contaminated water issue. Who's really responsible for that? Would it be KDHE, the city, or the county?
So all 3 of them would probably have some involvement in that. So the City of Wichita obviously operates your water system. So obviously they have a role in that. KDHE sets standards for water quality, and then the county probably does some checking on different things as well. So there would be joint responsibility on that, because it's obviously a City of Topeka facility, but then you also have oversight from KDHE.
And Madam Chair, thank you, Jay. I love sharing the burden. And then finally, on the legislation that you said that you guys will bring forward, so when you talked about, gave the example of vehicle fees, so would that bear any burden on the citizens who are purchasing those or license plate fees? So just for clarification, thank you.
Right, so what we're hoping to do is to change the way the fees are distributed so that counties keep a larger portion of those fees, so that we don't drive up those costs on individuals. I think the proposal that we had before would keep the fee increase below $2, I think, for individuals that are registering vehicles. But really, we're looking at the distribution, because counties are providing a lot of that service, but not keeping a very big portion of that fee, which is pushing a lot of that burden onto property taxes.
Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I appreciate it. Thanks for bringing up our Senate Bill 3, which 2, which Senator Blue and I have submitted, and hopefully will end up in our committee, Madam Chair. Anyone who wants to know about Greeley County's problem, I'm intimately familiar with it. My question, though, is last year, in our grand tax compromise with the governor, we lost the statute regarding the VTR and city-county transfers. Will you be bringing any proposal that is more of a revenue-sharing proposal this session? Thank you.
At this point, we are not looking at revenue sharing right now. because LAVTR was essentially that revenue sharing portion, and it seems that there is not a legislative appetite for revenue sharing at this time, we are starting to look at other options for how we can make some of those things work, whether it is fee splits or things like that for the services that we do provide. We're really turning our attention to that. If there is an appetite for revenue sharing, we would certainly be interested in having those conversations as well, though.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Bowser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, gentlemen, for your great presentation today. In the last 6 months, I've had an opportunity to visit 5 different counties and attend 5 different county commission meetings. And their priorities seem to align pretty much with what you said. You know, these guys are concerned about roads and bridges, maintaining the aging infrastructure. They're concerned about, balancing their budget. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned in your priorities, but I thought maybe I would, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is kind of cybersecurity attacks on counties. I know a number of counties in Kansas experienced cybersecurity incidents this past year. Do you have any statistics on that? What's your organization doing around maybe helping counties prepare in the future for cybersecurity incidents? Thank you very much.
So one of the things that we've worked on, and it was not in the presentation, but one of the things that we've been trying to work on, both at KAC and also with our national organization, the National Association of Counties, is actually more cyber training. As most of you probably know, the biggest weakness in any cybersecurity plan is us as individuals. We are often the gateway for cybersecurity attacks, either by clicking on things that are incorrect or by misusing equipment or just sheer ignorance, for lack of a better term. And so we are trying to provide more training. We've provided training at both separately and also as a part of our conventions and conferences, so that our county staff is getting the training that they need so that they can recognize potentially malicious emails and software, so that they can recognize those things, so that hopefully those incidents don't happen, because as individuals, we all have to be vigilant on that so that we can prevent those attacks. Now, we have also—
Is there standardized training you're pushing out to
Yeah,
them?
we are getting that information out. We've had several speakers come out from the federal level to work with our counties. The National Association actually does a screening where they will come in and test your systems to see where there are potential weaknesses. So we've been trying to encourage our counties to make use of that as well. So we've been trying to provide those things. Cyber is not something I necessarily talk a lot about publicly because there are risks with talking about what measures we're taking to secure counties, but it is something that is important to our organization.
Thank you. And I will end on a positive note here. I've had a very good experience with the Jackson County Noxious Weed Department. I think we have about 12 noxious weeds identified in the state, and I've got about 13 on my farm. But they're very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent.
Any other questions? I do have a few quick ones, Jay. What is in a vehicle registration? What are their parts? And are we going back to the bill that we've seen in the past where we'd like one fee only rolled together? So what's in that?
So the state collects a fee. There's a modernization fee that still exists. The county gets a fee. There's a tax associated with it that goes to the state. I'm trying to picture the form so I can go down the list. It's all in statute. I can't call up the exact statute right now, but there are several.
You can tell me that.
Yes,
We can get that later. And I do know there's quite a list, and I remember the effort to pull all of it together like $20, or it seems simplified. And I'd be curious in that, if we can help there. Do we still do a per copy fee to file the land records? Is it like $10 per form that was in lieu of the registration
Yeah,
tax?
so they did simplify that fee. They eliminated the per page fee, if I remember correctly. But there are still some fees for the registration of deeds and mortgages.
How many counties have an administrator?
20, it's about 25. A couple of counties just added administrators, so I can't remember if it's 24 or 26, but it's somewhere in that range.
Oh, okay. Well, and my other question could be going to your Senate bill, is it 2, Bill? That we can talk about the website, either both. And I think we'd hear if we eliminated the newspapers would be a problem for some of us.
And
so-
we're not seeking to eliminate the newspapers. What we are seeking is an either or a both. That way counties can make the judgment of what works best for them. Because in some communities, it may be important to still put that in the newspaper because a lot of people in that jurisdiction read the newspaper and get the newspaper and look at that locally, and that may be the best way to get that information out there.
Well, that's something we can scope out more in Senate Bill 2. Hopefully, we get that bill. And I have 14 counties, and I receive 21 newspapers a week. And they are important to me, and I do collect information in them, so they are very important. Well, those were the thoughts I had and my questions. Any others? It's amazing how fast 55 minutes goes, isn't it? So well, we can get on to our next meeting. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Bruce. And if you'd like us to know other information to help you, we're very happy to hear your concerns. So thank you very much. Well, I think this is all we have on our agenda today. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 22nd on our agenda so far. So thank you very